one of those drills, you posted a 38.5 vertical jump, a record amongst offensive linemen in the NFL competing in the combine. 38.5 feet?
Inches? No, not feet. Not feet, no.
My vertical is like 6 inches.
Yeah.
Like, it's nothing.
Yeah.
Hello, Jackrabbits Nation. My name is Heidi Bushong, and this is the Yellow and Blue Podcast. We've got a special guest in studio today. He's a former left tackle for the SDSU football team, an alum of the 605 Hogs, number 74, Garrett Greenfield. Thank you so much for being here today, Garrett.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on. Excited to be here.
So everyone's dying to know, what have you been up to?
Yeah, it's been a pretty busy few months since, the championship games. I feel like we were on the stage celebrating, and then I blinked, and then now I'm here. So we won the game, obviously, and that was on a Sunday. And then Monday morning, I met my agents in the lobby and, signed all the paperwork and stuff to move forward. And then so that same morning, I drove over to Fort Worth, Texas, where I got to my training facility. And then Tuesday morning, I was right into training full time. So kind of went pretty quick after the game was done, and I was there for up until the combine, and then after the combine was done, I came back up to Brookings here, and I've just been working out with Coach Jacobs and the strength program here at SCSU, just working out and kind of, waiting to see what happens and just staying ready for these next few weeks.
Yeah, for sure. So you were in Texas for a good amount of time then.
I was, yeah, and I'd stayed down there after the game, obviously, till about the middle of March, so.
That's a long time. So not that you may have a ton of downtime right now while you're training to hopefully be drafted in the NFL draft. What do you like to do in your free time?
I like to be outdoors. I like golfing a lot. I like to hunt in my free time too. It's kind of tough. Just with how busy I am, it's hard to get out as much as I'd like to. I really like enjoying time with my family just because, football takes up so much of my time. So anytime I get to be with them, I'm an uncle too. I have, little nieces and nephews.
Love
so.
that.
Love hanging out with them and just really being with them and spend as much quality time as I can with them.
Yeah, absolutely, because things very well could change here in the next week or so.
No doubt.
Football really has taken you on a journey. You've been here at SDSU for 6 years now. Why did you choose football? What do you love about the game?
Honestly, ever since I was a kid, it was, something that was big in my family. Every Sunday the NFL would be on from by the time we got home from church to, when we went to bed. So, it's just always something I loved. We were a big sports family. My older brother played it too. And, he was 6 years older than me. So I just always thought, watching him do it, I thought it was the coolest thing ever. And it just brings you with so many great people, and just the feeling that it gives you and the friendships that you make is what I love about it the most.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you played multiple sports, but you ultimately picked football.
Yeah, football had always been my favorite. Everything else kind of came after that one, but yeah, football was always what I love to do the most.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know football was probably part of the reason why you came to SDSU. But you graduated with a degree in advertising. We're here recording in Yeager Media Center. You've probably walked by this room hundreds of times.
Yeah.
What was your favorite part about going to school here?
There's a lot of things, but I think more than anything it was just the people. Everywhere you go, just on campus or you go off campus, everybody's just, so nice, and everybody loves the Jackrabbits. I made so many, lifelong connections and friends here that's what made it such a special place to me. And it's really become, another home to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Was there a favorite class or like a favorite professor you had here?
Yeah. I just saw him in the hallway, before walking in here, I don't remember what the exact name of the class was, but it was our capstone with, Marina Hendrickson, Roxanne Lucchese. Yeah. And, that was just a fun class because it wasn't really schoolwork. It kind of felt like we were, working a job. So, a little more freedom. And I just, remember in the first day, everybody kind of, sat apart and didn't really know each other. Then by the end of the semester, we were all kind of sad the semester was over and we wouldn't be, seeing each other as much anymore. So I'd say that would be my favorite class.
Yeah, it really kind of prepares you for a career in advertising or what it's like to pitch to clients.
Yeah, it was fun. It was a lot of fun.
When you were being recruited, the other reason why you probably picked SDSU. What stood out to you about this place?
I had kind of a short recruiting journey, honestly. This was my first offer, and it happened very early in my junior year of high school, early March. And Coach Stig called me on a Sunday, and I think I committed the less than a week after that, or
Sure.
10 days after that or something. So I came on a visit here a junior day. in like late February, my junior high school, and it was just that gut feeling you have right away. I really can't describe it. Just everything just felt right, and it felt like, you know, it'd be something I could fit in at, and all the coaching staff all just felt so genuine, and you know, just at the end of the day, it was just that gut feeling that, you know, I don't really need to look anywhere else. It was, you know, this is where I am supposed to be.
When you like commit to going to a place, is it like one of those things where you don't want to seem too eager? You don't want to like call back the next day? Like you had to wait a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, you know, looking back, I probably did it wrong, because I think you're like, if you want to, you can, you know, leverage kind of some of that stuff. But, you know, I think I was probably overly anxious to commit. Like, I didn't even know, they said they would give me a scholarship, but I didn't know for how much or anything like that. So, and I just called them and told them I was coming. So
yeah,
I don't know if I helped myself out there right away, but I think they could tell I was eager to come here, and I think they knew they had a pretty good shot of getting me. So
good deal for both parties.
Yeah, I mean, it worked out okay now, obviously, but yeah, probably not the best business handling on my end there at the start.
It's okay, you've got that stuff for later. So you were one of the rare people in Jackrabbit history to have 6 years of eligibility, and you were on the offensive line, a member of a pretty special group on campus called the 605 Hogs. For people who may not know what that is, what is it?
So 605 is obviously the area code for South Dakota. So we kind of use that as a way to brand ourselves. So the 6 is for 60 minutes, you know, the full game of, you know, all your effort and all your focus. 0 is 0 excuses. And then 5 is all 5 linemen playing as one. Because it's, you know, there's 5 people that are meant to do one position, so you got to be on the same page as everybody else. And then the Hogs, it's always been a term for O-linemen, and then, you know, it's just we're going to do the dirty work, and we don't really need any recognition or credit or praise from, you know, anybody else. We know that, you know, we're happy to do the dirty work and get the job done.
I never realized like that much went into the name.
Yeah, no, there was a whole thing behind it. It was Coach Eck back. He started that like I think a year after he got here or something. He's at the University of Idaho now, but he was the one who kind of came up with that, and that was kind of how we started to brand ourselves afterwards.
Would you define it like also like as like a brotherhood? I mean, you guys really got to work together.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I might be biased, obviously, but I think we were probably one of the closest position groups on the whole team, just because of how important it is that we're a cohesive unit, and you know, we got along so well. You know, we were all super close. We hung out all the time outside of football, and then obviously all the time you spend together with them during football as well. So
yeah, for sure. Out of your first 4 seasons here, you started out as right tackle.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then you shifted to the left,
yep.
which obviously, you know, got 2 national championships in those years. Yep. What was that transition like? Was it hard to adjust?
Yeah, I mean, it was a little tricky, probably more so than I had originally thought it was going to be, just because everything, you know, I'd been doing one thing for so long, and then all of a sudden I just had to flip it, and everything was, you know, kind of backwards. So, you know, I got the hang of it, but it probably took a little longer than I, you know, thought it would, just really feeling comfortable over there and getting used to it. But, I mean, just with anything, you know, the more I did it, the better I felt at it.
You went 4 seasons being a right tackle to the left side. What's the major difference between the right and left?
It's just everything is, you know, inverse of what it was on the other side. So, you know, on your right side, you're right in your stance, like your right foot's behind you, and like the main hand you're using is your right hand, and then you go to the left side and your left foot's behind you, you're using your left hand mostly. So it's all the same movement, but again, everything's flipped, you know, opposite of what, you know, I had been so used to doing for, you know, up to 4 years at that point. So, you know, it felt a little goofy at first, but, you know, it's just the more I did it, the better I felt at it, and, you know, more reps equaled more comfortability with it.
Yeah, for sure. When you made that switch, or even throughout your time here, did you train at different camps? Did you meet different NFL players? Like, what was kind of your mantra there?
Yep. So, I mean, there was a couple times I went to a camp in Minneapolis this last summer before the 2023 season. I learned a lot there. That was, you know, very beneficial. And, you know, there was a offensive lineman kind of conference down in Frisco, Texas that, you know, I had attended 2 summers in a row. So just, you know, everything I could do outside of what we were already doing to kind of learn more about it, and, you know, give myself more information on, you know, how to make things easier, trying different techniques or stuff like that, just because it's such a complex position. There's so much you can do with it, and it's something you can always try to learn more about. And you know, it's just like with anything, you have to, you know, stay on your toes and, you know, always be learning something new, and you never get content with where you're at, and be willing to try new stuff.
last 2 seasons at left tackle. It's been a really big trajectory for you, as we said earlier, since you switched to that side. You had a perfect season, 2 national championships. What has that been like in that like contrast? You know, you're finally getting to the places where you guys have been wanting to go.
Yeah, it's special. I don't really know how else to describe it. I mean, it's just to be a part of history and, you know, so much history that, you know, has been going on these last 2 years, and, you know, all the success that we've had, and just like the class and all the guys I got to do it with, you know, that had been here for so long and poured so much into the program, and like all the coaches who have worked tirelessly for, you know, how many years to, you know, finally get this program to, you know, what they always thought it could be, and, you know, what everybody thought it could be. To be part of the team that, you know, gets it done and then gets it done again, and, you know, wins 29 games in a row, and gets the first perfect season ever, and it's incredibly special. But you know, it wasn't by accident, because, you know, like I said, there's been so many years of hard work from so many different people, you know, pouring into this place to, you know, keep taking it a step further every year.
Yeah, absolutely. You said that your recruitment journey was pretty short. You came to SDSU, really wanted to come here. Did you expect to achieve those kinds of things here when you first came here?
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of my draw here initially, because, I mean, I was getting recruited by NDSU as well, but
good choice.
Yeah, no, obviously made the right choice there. But, my big thing was their whole recruiting pitch was like, you know, we're right there. We're we're getting ready to win a national championship. Like, that's the goal around here. And I guess in my eyes, I wanted to be a part of that first one who got the job done, instead of going to North Dakota State, where, you know, it had been done already before. You know, I wanted to be part of like the ones who paved the way, and you'll finally break through and, you know, get the first one in the school's history, as opposed to, you know, carrying on something that had been done before. I just thought there was a lot to be said for, you know, carving out your own tradition and, you know, creating that standard. And, you know, that's what we accomplished.
I never really thought about it like that. Like, why is that so special to you to be the first to set the standard? Like, you go out there and raise the bar.
I just think there's, you know, everybody remembers the people who got it done the first time. So, I mean, and there's obviously merit in, you know, carrying on to the tradition that had been laid before you. But, you know, because that's what we're relying on guys to do now. You know, all of us who have, you know, our time is up here. That's, you know, what we're expecting from everybody who comes through after us. But, you know, to be a part of the first group who gets it done is just incredibly special. And, you know, that's one that, you know, nobody's ever going to forget.
Yeah, I certainly won't forget it. I know you won't either.
No.
With that being said, first championship is done, January 2023. You're one of those few people who will ever have a 6th year of eligibility, and you decided to come back. Mm-hmm. Why did you decide to come back?
I mean, there was a lot that went into it, but kind of the brass tacks of it all was I couldn't, you know, say goodbye to such a special thing that easily. You know, all my best friends were still here, you know, and we knew we could, you know, turn around and do it all over again. And then, you know, ultimately I wanted to put myself in a better position for the draft too. So those were kind of the 2 biggest reasons. And I think that, you know, obviously both of those were accomplished. You know, I kind of needed that 6th year to develop myself better and, you know, help myself out moving forward. But yeah, the main thing was just, you know, you can't say no to being a part of something that special again. And I think going through everything in that 6th year was kind of in the back of your head. It's like, this is, you know, obviously COVID was a horrible deal. And, you know, looking back at the time, no one knew what was going on. But, you know, looking back at now, it's, you know, that whole extra year, that's something that nobody else in, you know, college sports has ever had before. So just being very aware that this whole extra year was an incredible gift, and to not squander a minute of it, because, you know, that's an opportunity, like I said, that not a lot of people have had before, if ever. So a whole extra year with, you know, to play college football and to be a part of another national championship team, and to spend a whole another year with all your friends and, you know, keep getting better, when, you know, that wasn't even, you know, I was supposed to be graduating by then and everything. So I really just tried to, you know, live in the moment every single day, soak it all in, because, you know, I knew it was a special time and a special thing to be part of.
Absolutely. Coming off of that first national championship win, it's kind of a different vibe. You know, You're defending, you're looking to go out and do it again. like, what, 22 of the 23 players were returning?
Yeah, a lot.
It was so many, which
Yeah.
probably was really encouraging for you to come back. Like, how did it feel to be the ones who were being hunted instead of going hunting?
No, it was definitely different. When you're trying to get to the top of the mountain as opposed to when you're on the top and, you see all these other people gunning for what you have. So, it was definitely a huge shift of, the first time to the second time. Like this last year, it was, it was kind of a short celebration, honestly, because I think we started lifting in like a week or two after the championship game. So, we got right back down to business right away. And it was just a different set of expectations going into the 2023 season. Like nobody picked us to lose a game. It was like, yeah, there's no way they're going to lose. Like it's, might as well just wrap it up and give it to them now. Don't even bother playing in the games or anything like that. So, that in and of itself is its own, huge distraction that, we tried to combat and, not letting any of this stuff, the outside noise, seep into the locker room and, what we were doing on a day-to-day basis. And, obviously looking at it now, we did a fantastic job of that. We didn't listen to, all the stuff saying that, we were just that much better than everybody else. We just kept attacking every day with that same hunger like we did the year before. And, nobody acted like, we had arrived or we had, we'd really accomplished anything. We were just that mature of a team. We were that hungry to do it again.
For sure. Reflecting on the past 2023 season, is there a game in your mind that kind of sticks out to you, or is it kind of like this one's down, on to the next?
Yeah, I think we were just really focused on a week-to-week basis, but I think the Montana State game was really big. It was early in the season, week 2.
They were going to be huge.
Yeah, right. They were super good. They were a very, very good team. And, week 2 is early in the year. You're not, you haven't reached the peak of how you should be performing yet. So, we still we're working through some stuff. But I really think that game just, it wasn't like shocking to us, but it just proved that, no matter how we had to do it, that we were going to win every game we were in.
Yeah. For sure. I didn't know, like, if it kind of seems like a week-to-week attitude, like, let's rock and roll, let's keep it moving. But you got to admit, there's some moments that, like, stick out in your mind.
Yeah, I think that was a big one. And, there's just a lot of games like the Albany game, the semifinals. But, when you're going through it, it's very week to week. You're not worried about what had happened or anything coming up in the future. But being able to reflect on it now, there's a lot of special moments and, just a lot of great memories.
I thought the Albany game was a super exciting game. I was here for it. I was like, let's go look at flights.
Yeah, right. That's what a lot of people, before that game even happened, I had a bunch of family be like, asking about information for Frisco and stuff. I'm like, guys, I can't talk about this.
Like, go ask somebody else, please.
I'm not supposed to, I can't be doing that. So.
Let's talk about that a little bit. I mean, you guys just seem so, like, laser focused just with how the season went. How do you deal with all the outside stuff?
I mean, kind of like what I was referring to earlier, the best way is just not listen to it, not give it any attention. I think that's what we did such a great job of, just because there was so much, so much of it. And, that just, complacency that's the biggest enemy. And that's what we had always talked about. So, nobody really gave it any energy or any focus, and you just kind of, let all those other people that are just doing their job, and, let them do their job, and we're going to do ours, and we'll see what happens by the end of the year.
Absolutely. So the last time you ever put on a Jackrabbits jersey, to my knowledge, you were able to secure second national championship title. Seems like same story, same place, been here before. How did it feel that you guys accomplished what you had set out to do?
Yeah, it was definitely, it was an emotional day for sure. Just, kind of that whole week leading up to the game, just, like I'd said, there were so many guys that was going to be their last game. So I really think, what I alluded to earlier, everybody was just super in the moment, just enjoying everything from, the flight to the team meals to, just all the meetings and everything. So, to know that we got it done again, it was obviously an incredible feeling, and 15-0, completing the perfect season. But at the same time, I think a lot of us were sad that we were done as Jackrabbits, and we weren't really ready to give that part of our life up yet. But time has to move on, and just if something has to end, then obviously you can't draw up a better way for it to end than how we did it.
Absolutely. As you were kind of talking a little bit about the 605 Hogs, you talked about those values, what that stood for. There was a lot of thought that went into it. That kind of goes to speak for the program overall. SDSU football has some very, very strong values. How have those, through your time, made you grow not only as a player, but also as a person?
Yeah. So our big thing, obviously, you see it all over the place is last play. And, we always talked about, yeah.
I'm glad I wore this today.
Right, yeah. We talk about how, last play is a lifestyle. And, kind of the original meaning of is like, if something was unfortunately to happen, did you give your full effort on that play if that was going to be your last play ever? So we talk about that as a lifestyle, and that's how you got to do everything. With academics and how you treat people and how you go about your business, everything should be that last play mentality, and all your values have to align with how you're doing everything. You can't do one thing half-heartedly and then do another thing wholeheartedly. So, everything you do, you gotta, give it your all and pour everything you have into it, and leave it better than you found it.
Is there anything else that you want to add about your time at SDSU? Anything about SDSU football?
Yeah, I mean, it's there's just so much I could say about it. It was, whatever experience of college football that I could have dreamt up, it was 10 times better than what I could have ever imagined. So just how special everybody was, and all the great friends I made, and just the great coaching staff, and everybody, just so many great people involved, and the medical staff and equipment staff, and GAs, just everybody from top to bottom is just such great people to be around, and just like I said, it made these last 6 years better than I could have ever imagined.
That's awesome. Because now you're looking to turn a new chapter in your life, one that we're all excited for, that we're rooting for you. I don't know if you knew this statistic, but since 1939, 31 Jackrabbits have been drafted in the NFL.
I did not know that.
Well, now you know.
Yeah.
Hoping to, add three more here with this draft class, if not more. 5 of those players have been drafted in the last 6 years. Some of them your former teammates, which is pretty cool. Yep. What's it like coming to a school and being part of a team where you see your teammates competing in the NFL?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty special, and obviously that's what a lot of people grow up wanting to do. So I think that just goes to show that if that's something you want to chase after, that South Dakota State can give you that opportunity, and there's more than enough resources to help you achieve that. It's like I said, it's a special place, and if you're good enough, that they're going to give you that opportunity, and there's more than enough resources here at South Dakota State that can push you to where you want to go.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're getting ready for that next step in your career. You've declared for the NFL draft. How have you been training? How have you been preparing for this? Is it a lot more intense?
No, it's pretty similar stuff. Before the combine and everything, you're focusing more on training for the drills and all the testing and stuff like that. Now that that's over, it's just kind of back into, regular football training, athletic movement, stuff like that, strength-based, speed-based, everything like that. So, there might be some differences just on depending on what part of the journey you're at, but it's all pretty similar.
You said that you were training down in Fort Worth. What was that like? Did you have some of your teammates there with you?
No, so that's my agents have had a lot of success sending people there. Some of their other clients they sent there and had good success there. So I liked it a lot. A lot of great people I was with. Great speed coaches and strength coaches and everything like that. So I was very happy with where I was at, and there was no snow down there either, too. So the months I was there. And, unfortunately, I got back up here middle of March, and, there was that huge snowstorm. So
like the one snowstorm.
Yeah, I know. That's what, I called my mom a couple times. She's like, yeah, there's been no snow on the ground here for, weeks. And then I get back up here, and, sure enough. So been in the Midwest my whole life, so, I couldn't miss out on snow for an entire year. But I
don't know what about it is. Rock Valley, is probably a completely different climate than Brookings, South Dakota, too, honestly. It seems like it's always warmer down south.
It is. It's weird. Even it's 90 minutes away to go home as compared to here. It's always 5 degrees colder and a little windier whenever you're here, but a little more snow too. But that's all right.
I love that. So tell me, what has this pre-draft process been like? You said you had an agent. Like, did you like go and secure one on Monday, or did you have somebody in your ear?
No, yeah, I kind of, some of them reach out, before even as early as the summer, going through the season, just trying to get to know each other a little bit better. So, I kind of know what direction I wanted to go, when it was time to make that decision. So, I got to know them pretty good. And like I said, I felt really good about my decision when it was time to make that decision.
So, Garrett, you were one of 3 Jackrabbits to participate in the NFL Combine. Your teammate on the offensive line, Mason McCormick, was there, and so was Isaiah Davis, a running back for SDSU. Went to Indianapolis, competed. What was that like? Like, so much pressure.
Yeah, right. It was an incredible experience, and it was something I was very glad to be a part of because, obviously, growing up a huge football fan, like every spring I'd turn on the combine and watch it, for as long as I can remember. So to be a part of an event like that is just kind of surreal. But at the same time, I was there to. It was a big job interview, so I was there to perform and I was there to, handle business. So I couldn't get too caught up in, everything else about it. And, couldn't just be happy to be there. There was work to be done when we got there, but it was a great experience. Everything's very well done, and I met a lot of great guys. And then again, just to be there with Mason and Isaiah too, just to have some familiar faces around is super comforting and helpful. But a lot of other great guys I met there too from other schools.
Sure. You said it's like a big job interview. Obviously people care about your performance, but do scouts stop and ask you questions, or how does that work?
Yeah, so there's scouts there and coaches there. So, you interview with them a couple times throughout the week that you're there. And then there's a lot of medical testing. And then obviously the drills on the field, what you see on TV.
One of those drills, you posted a 38.5 vertical jump, a record amongst offensive linemen in the NFL competing in the combine. 38.5 feet?
Inches, no. Not feet, no.
My vertical is like 6 inches.
Yeah.
It's nothing.
Yeah.
What went through your mind when you posted that? Were you like, yes,
yeah,
thank you?
I didn't know it was a record, after they announced it or anything. There's a couple of guys came up and told me like, hey, I think you just broke this record or whatever. So, honestly, I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. But, obviously that was like one of the first things we did. So, I still had a lot of other stuff I had to do and a lot of other work that, I still had to get after. So, that's really all it was. I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. I just kept going about my business because, I still had the whole day ahead of me and testing and drills ahead of me. So I just kind of, took it for what it was and just kept moving.
Expectations were high.
Yeah, right.
So the 2024 NFL draft is April 25th through 27th. Obviously you're going to be watching that. We're hoping that you get drafted. Do you have any plans?
No, not really. I'm just gonna, be back home with my family and, we'll be watching obviously and, just wait and see what happens and, hopefully hear my name called.
Are there any mentors, anybody who you kind of look up to?
Yeah, I just think, me and my brother are very close. He's done a lot for me and, just watching, how hard he works for his family and, stuff like that. Between him and my uncle, they've really helped me out a lot. And then also my dad passed away, 4 years ago. So just kind of having the memory of him is always, something that inspires me. And, I was just trying to, live like him and, do the best I can in everything I do. So, kind of just those 3, but really just my family in general, just, trying to keep going and, take this as far as possible because, I've sacrificed a lot throughout my football career and, for me to be in this position. So, all of them have been super helpful to me and I just, hope I can repay them going forward.
I love that. That's really nice. Any lessons that you're taking with you?
Yeah, like I said earlier, this place does a great job of preparing you for, life after football. Obviously, all the lessons they teach you apply to football, but obviously, or also in life, outside of football as well. So, just to be a good person to everybody you meet, and just whatever you're doing, you know, it has to have that last play mentality. You have to, you know, work hard at it, and you know, you can't just pick and choose what you want to, you know, put your whole effort into. It's got to be everything, and I think that's a lesson that you know, if people can really apply, it'll serve them well moving forward.
Thank you so much for being here today, Garrett.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on. I really enjoyed it.
We're wishing you the best of luck here, hoping you get drafted here in the NFL draft April 25th through the 27th. We'll be watching.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Cut.